So when I was asked to, come up with a topic for the keynote, I was asking myself, how am I going to kill time trying to speak for 50 minutes to an hour? Because the attention span of current during COVID time is 15 to 20 minutes. So I thought maybe we should start with something that's interesting more than something that is technical and all that. So came out the topic finding relevance in the haystack of cybersecurity predictions. At the end of the year, almost every vendor, every analyst that you can think of will come up with some kind of prediction. And it comes about when people read it, some people trying to figure out what it means. So without further ado, thank you for coming to the session. I'm going to share this with you. So first of all, let's look at what is a prediction. I think prediction, if you look at what the dictionary says, is a statement about what might happen in the future. And why do people care what will happen in the future? Now, there are many reasons that happens. And during this whole COVID period, I'm quite sure that all of us faces different situation, and we want something to be told about what will happen tomorrow. I think in prediction, there's two forms of prediction. One is what we call a non-statistical. It is an informed guess or opinion because there's no data to support it. Usually this is based on experience. People want to share with you their thoughts, their opinion about something. And, you want to talk to someone who has the subject matter expertise, who can give you an opinion about what would happen tomorrow or a potential, happening in the next, timeline, right? The other one is statistical based, is typically part of the inference. Sometimes in sales, we call it forecasting, we call it forecasting, and predicting the numbers and all that. And it's important that it is supported by data. And in the process of preparing for this presentation, I was looking up multiple reports and data, surveys and all this. Interestingly, it is not easy to, when someone says 60%, 70%, 50%, it is not easy to understand what is the context. So when you look at a lot of these forecasting or prediction reports and all this, look at it objectively before you agree or disagree, because I think the information in there can help you or potentially mislead you. Okay, so let's start with some stories. And I love stories. Like when you look at this end of the year, I would say, what would be a story that explain about prediction and the yield for an outcome and prediction, right? This is, you folks will be familiar is the three wise men, right? Christmas is coming. We're talking about the three wise men looking for that star, talk about baby Jesus' birth. And the interesting part is one of the reasons why people look for in terms of prediction is long suffering awaiting home. During that time, if you look at the map below, the Roman Empire was conquering a big chunk of Europe, and there's a lot of aggression, a lot of pain for hundreds of years. And when there is a hope, a news that tells you what is potentially going to come, you can imagine people are rushing to it. People are hoping that this is the answer. And we can call it in the religious way, call it prophecies. In a in a technical way, in our world, we call it a prediction and all this. So I do want to use this as a reminder and as an example that when we go through that difficult time for the last 2 years, right, in COVID situation, there will be many frustration with employee working from home, remote access, creating more surface for attacks. And then we are now looking for the silver bullet. And there's a lot of technology that we talk about. There are a lot of silver bullet that's been explained. I'm myself representing FireEye, we sell solution as well. But we got to be careful that will there be a silver bullet if we don't understand the underlying fundamentals. So that is one. We need certainty to reduce risk and prevent disaster. You look at this is example of a weather forecast. Many times we want to know what are the issues, what are the weather, for example, in this case, that fishermen can't go out, crops can't harvest, and so on and so forth. And to a larger extent, it could become a calamities. Recent time, what is the closest that is close to my heart was in Tokyo or in Japan. There were a series of earthquakes that happened over a 1 month or 2 month time. And one customer actually asked, how safe is it for me to put my workload on this cloud service provider in Tokyo? And that is the part, it prompts you to think that many consideration, many assumptions are not necessarily true. We think that, this cloud service providers, uptime is guaranteed, I don't have to worry about it. Right? Yesterday, you saw some news about cloud services, fundamental services that was impacted and was down, and many other application services is affected by it. So we want certainty to reduce risk, because risks affect us directly. We're waiting for the bad things to end. For example, when in the last 12 months, I would say one of the things that I've been wanting is, when will COVID ever end? When we make different decisions as an organization, I come from Singapore, when the government make certain decision to open up and all these people actually die, right? And same here, when we make decision in our organization as leaders, whether we make a decision to implement a new technology or replace the old one, does it actually, overcome the risk of those threats? And would bad things happen or worse thing happens? I think this is where we want to make sure that while it is an urge to overcome these times of badness, it may not actually happen. So are we huddling up and be prepared for the storm ahead? So these predictions give us a reality check as well. Okay. And that's from a generic perspective, from vendors, analysts, even governments. I like to say that there's thought leadership involved. I've seen some prediction that come from analysts that has good insights into what they have researched, and they like to share it as form of prediction. Actual fact, the synonyms for prediction is also such as opinion, ideas, and so on and so forth, right? So let's look at where is the perspective from the other side. Of course, marketing hype just help in selling, right? When we talk about prediction, you see many vendors also talk about why you need certain solution. Why only certain solution can help you. You got to deal with it in a certain way or different way of designing your architecture. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that you need to understand that this is the motivation behind some of this, so that you are in a position of power to filter all this noise and distill what is relevant to your organization and to your decision-making process. Okay. Me too. Everybody else making prediction. If I don't, sounds like I'm not that smart. I'm just being candid here, right? I was just doing a search on cybersecurity prediction for 2022, and I saw easily, 3 pages, 4 pages of different vendors, from Intel service provider to product service provider to you name it, right? To analysts. And when I look at the items they mentioned, one of the things that keep coming to my mind that I could not reconcile is, if someone is trying to predict what is obvious, how is that a prediction? If someone is trying to tell me what I already knew because it happened yesterday, that's not really a prediction. It's more like a reminder. So again, some of this reminder is useful for you to pick up. However, you need to see the relevant to your organization as well and what you are doing and concerned about today. So while you see that there's a lot of me too, and sometimes you can kind of disregard and say, oh, okay, this vendor is saying the same thing as the other vendor. I would say pause a bit, and if you have time or that, assign to someone to just kind of browse through it. Some of those nuggets in what they talk about could be helpful to your organization. Last but not least is no consequences. These predictions are opinion researchers that they share. In fact, you find that most of these vendors do not have to deal with consequences if they miss the target. So because of that, just take it with a pinch of salt and take the input that will help you. I like to say that I personally I read quite a bit of that, including predictions from my company, from FireEye, from Mandiant, from my competitor like CrowdStrike, Trend Micro, Fortinet, Forrester, Gartner. The reason is because everyone specializes in something. Different organization has a bit of research into an area that you may not be good in, and it's important to look across the board, because instead of looking at cybersecurity as a me versus you, I think it is us against them. What is the us? The us is you and me, right? We are the defender, and the defender is always in a disadvantaged position because the vendors themselves, is of course a little bit more concerned about sharing anything, and the enterprises, customers, like yourself, is struggling with how do I get the best and who can give me the best price. Usually it boils down to relationship and all this, and it's not easy to be objective on what's next that you need to do. But for the attacker, things are different. There's a value chain there. There's an industry in there. Ransomware as a service. Nation state that is using superior capability to control geopolitical situation. So for the prediction that comes in, well, there's no consequences. Take it and look at. I would like to say, by the end of the year, review what happened that was predicted last year. So for a start, let me just do a quick quiz. I'm trying to figure out if you can respond, and if you can't, raise hand seems to be the easiest. Then we can, or the chat box seems to be the easiest. Let's do that, okay? So first quiz, to keep you awake and keep me awake as well, is what is the most predicted cybersecurity topic that you think will happen for 2022? I'm not sure if you have read some. I'm not sure you have read the past. What do you think is the most predicted cybersecurity topic for 2022? Any thoughts? Just put in your chat box. Give me a word, or something along that line. Hacking and phishing. Okay, good. Ransomware. Absolutely. Ransomware. Okay. Anything else? Hacking, zero trust. Okay. Okay. Ransomwares. Okay, this is a new one. Ransomwares. Okay. EDR, service attacks, phishing, ransomware, zero trust. Okay. I think that's a good thought process, and you're probably right to some extent. Is I didn't go picked up and counted the line items. Let's be frank, so I'm not gonna give you a generic answer. The reality is there's two parts. One part is in all the answers that's given, things like fish, DLPs and XDR, all this, I would say that those are what I classify as solution, typically from vendors. Right? And vendor was talk about the relevance of their solution. Ransomware is a problem statement. It is about how threat actors uses a certain attack techniques, TTPs to go after an enterprise. Right? That's how the risk manifested. And of course, Threat Intel talks about the geopolitical situation and so on and so forth. So ransomware is hot. It's hot. The other one is how the new norm will evolve. Right? Most of you I personally didn't realize until I read it. In the last 1.5, 2 years during the COVID situation, one of the industry that boasted the most or grew the most is actually venture capitalists. Right? There's a lot of venture capitalist dollars pour into startups, securities, you name it. And you would think that at one point during the initial months of COVID, people were thinking that the economy will tank, inflation will go up, things are going to be hard. But the reality is there's a lot of money that's put into acquisition of infrastructure for working from home employee, so on and so forth, right? And you find that trend influence how the attack surface changes and how an attacker, come after the organization. So thanks for your answers. It's fantastic. I think that is good thoughts. Next question. Do you care about what really happened for cybersecurity in 2022? Okay, this one, don't worry, okay? I will not say that to anybody else, not collecting names. Do you really care? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, yes, yes. Okay. I love it. That's why you're here. And that's why I'm here, right? Okay, thank you very much. Again, I think this is good and is important because um, cybersecurity is one of the fastest growing industry in terms of the way it deals with the new trend, the way it needs us to be equipped for it. I think the mindset that we changes from traditional information management is whatever you put in place is good enough for tomorrow. Which is why I asked about this is if you do care, you can't live on past decision, past strategy and implementation to protect you tomorrow. You do need to keep abreast of the new ideas, new concerns, and new information that's coming into your organization. There is a personal ownership. So number 3, what are the area of concern that you have for your organization? When I say for your organization, I'll give an example. For example, internal threats, right? Company information leaking, ransomware attack where company data is posted on the internet, and so on and so forth, right? So what are the areas of concern that you have? Still phishing, okay. Data privacy, remote work from home setup. Yep. I think that those are all legitimate confidential data. Yes. And these are all big problems to be solved, right? The reason why I say that is when I did a survey recently. It's not a huge audience, but it was for another event, and it was around ransomware. And I asked the audience of customers or offline, in a survey, and says, hey, are you worried about? Do you think you're prepared if there's a ransomware attack? And they're like, yeah, we're prepared, no worries, no. And I said, how many of you are aware that your company was ever attacked in the last, I think it was like 1 month? And most of them like, no idea, haven't heard about it, wasn't told, no way to access the information if they were attacked. So okay, so now how much are you certain? And most of them end up struggling knowing the reality, right? So I think in the whole organization, education is key, right? Because from top to bottom, senior executive, what you're worried about here, confidentiality, phishing, ransomware, data privacy, so on and so forth. What does it mean when something goes wrong? I'm not going to use a fear tactic, but you know that when things goes wrong, senior people are asked to be accountable, right? CEO, CIO are asked to be accountable. Okay, so do you think you have done your best with organization should this concern actually happen? Again, my question wasn't that you are protected, but do you think you've done your best? Okay, after this, there's one last question, and then I'll move on to the next section, okay? Not enough. Thank you for being honest. I love that, right? I mean, all of us are in the learning phase. We can do better. Agree, totally agree. It is hard because it's not easy to chew with a problem. The problem is too multidimensional. I used to, thanks for sharing again, better before, need to do more, fantastic. I admire all your effort in being open. I used to have this, doing this cybersecurity training for one of the university entry program, right? And it was talking about what is cybersecurity? It's the risk related when you're doing business on the internet. And at one point we were just joking and said, well, if I pull out the plug, the wire, and it's not connected to the internet, then our risk should be zero, right? Wow. I say, yeah, but today's economy, how do you do it without the internet? So I think that is the part that we can't avoid. And hopefully, as a group, let's learn together. And I will share. I won't have all the answers, but I hope that in this session, I kind of point you to some of the approach, some of the thought process when you read these predictions. It is impossible for you and me and anybody in this group to do research that this specialist or this vendor is doing. I think it's important for us to be able to look at all the inputs and sharing and objectively pick up items that's relevant to what you're trying to achieve. And every one of us, in our organization are making different decisions, different part of the journey that we're walking in terms of our security posture, getting our plan together. So when you look at all this prediction that you see on the internet, it doesn't mean you can only read internet for next year. I would say look at the internet. Sorry. Look at the prediction for last year and how it fares, and I'll show you a few later. And of course, the last question is, you don't have to answer me. Are you prepared to do the right thing? Is the right thing is subjective, but it is hard, right? Because sometimes it's fighting for budget. Sometimes it's telling someone that the solution that he chose 2 years ago is a bad idea. Sometimes is asking senior leadership to prioritize dollars and cents into the area that is important, and it's a big tough fight. Okay, so last question, don't need to answer, but I know that it is tough, and all of you are trying hard. I've heard of that. Okay, so without further ado, I'll go into this one section. It's like 2021 security industry prediction trends. Why 2021? Which means that this is something that was talked about in 2020. The answer is hindsight. I know that there was a saying, and someone told me, hindsight is 2020, meaning that when you look at your rear mirror, because of whatever has happened, it gives you a certain validation of what you have done and where they're at. So when you look at end of 2021, at the prediction given by some of these people or summary, you find that, hey, that's good because I know that those predictions came true, didn't come true. Is it relevant to me? So and because there's many vendors that does prediction, right? So what I did is I went to this site, this govtech.com. It's a blog by Lorman. Lorman, I like the way he put it is he did many, he read many different blogs and he was summarizing some of the key points. And what I did is pick out some of the main points and see where they are at today and see if there are good answers as well, right? And I'm not trying to sell you my solution because I don't have all the solution, but I think there are areas that people have come up with solutions since the last prediction that is worthwhile looking at rather than just looking at prediction for 2022. This is the material fact. Working from home. In fact, I've seen a lot of organizations looking at working from home as a primary means, not as an alternative. At least 15-20% of the organization, including employee, would like to work from home most of the time. I'm talking about 5 days a week or 4 days a week. This percentage came from a survey that was done, I can't remember by which analyst, one of the analyst firms. And even internally, when we do that for our organization, for our employee population, is about 20-25% as well. And because of that, the home become a breeding ground for potential attacks. The truth is, will bad actors go after a specific person in a company that that's not prepared, right? And so on and so forth. We unpatch system and all this. I don't think that it's gonna be. You can't measure the percentage of the risk, but it is going to be a generic approach, and they trace it back to your home because you're using your home machine. So that is a true new attack vector that's true today, and for tomorrow it will continue to be true. So I would suggest that put this as one of the items that you look at. What are the different options and approach in dealing with this. I know of their buzzword, right? Zero trust, secure web gateway, SASE, right? And so on and so forth. Don't let the buzzword, kind of crowd your decision on a solution. My suggestion is there are many ways to fix a problem. Look at where the problem is and what are the capability that you need. Rushing to the cloud cause many security holes, challenges, misconfiguration, outage. If you think about it, moving to the cloud is an eminent situation. When organization move to the cloud, part of the motivation is there is a increased trust that this infrastructure will deliver from availability, from a security perspective. And truly, the cloud has better security setup compared to an enterprise trying to set it up themselves. Then it is about how it is used, right? And I would say that as this happens, the many security holes, the rushing to the cloud is not the reason why security holes happens. I think being ignorant of the different nature of this risk is what causes an enterprise. Because we think that we use a cloud service. I use cloud service from the different provider, even for my own learning and all this. Doesn't mean that because I trust them that risk doesn't exist. So I think that is a part where it is important to understand where are the risks coming from and when it will happen, which they publish all the time. The third one is a given, right? There are more products innovation happening, and you know what? When you have new products that are not designed with security in mind, challenges will happen. So this is one of the top three. Privacy will be a mess. Absolutely true. New laws, confusion, self-regulated failing. You look at GDPR, right? That one is as a big thing that created a lot of pressure for organizations working with data source from Europe. I know that in Brazil, they put in place a similar privacy law. So part of the, I almost felt that sometimes it's more around, taxing the money than actually creating the, how do I put it? Instead of helping the situation, because legislation set up like this, first of all, it's hard to enforce, and you always penalize the largest organization. And you know what? If they can afford to pay it, they will pay it and move on. If they can't afford to pay it, what can you do with it? You're not helping them, right? Identifying multi-factor authentication will take center stage as password start to go away in a tipping point year. So you find that identity MFA is one thing that is going to be, that has always been a central part of, let's say, a zero trust design. Right? How do you ensure that whoever is asking for the service is who they say they are? And it could be a human, it could be a system service, and so on and so forth. So, I think that's something to look at. Tons of high-profile Internet of Things, that will make headline. Ransomware will get worse and worse. We know that. This year was a year of ransomware, incrementally from last year. I'll share with you this year what some of the prediction on ransomware, and you'll find that it's actually quite interesting as well. Okay, the payload tools and tactic procedure for ransomware didn't change much. The turning point where that was uncovered was SolarWinds. And if you ask me why SolarWinds, is SolarWinds, reviewing SolarWinds, what happened was a risk in general. The reason is now the concept that you can go to a supplier who has a weaker security posture and indirectly opens out vulnerability that can help you get access to thousands of enterprises becomes an idea that did not go away. So we always say, when you want to learn, the bad things you learn fast. My parents always tells me, in any language, the bad words you learn faster, and it's the same thing. They know that it works and they started, right? And after that, we saw Echelon, zero-day vulnerability in the software. You look at Sonic War, you look at many of these vendors, right? So I want to say that as this new development, this new TTP comes about, the fundamental motive, intent, right? Their own, the whole structure of how they work doesn't really change like 360 degrees. Right? And then you got to ask yourself, how much are you ready for that? 5G vulnerabilities is one of it. APT attacks will be widely available from criminal networks now, and this one is like this is last year, end of last year prediction, and it's probably before SolarWinds happens, right? And the answer is true. There's more access made available. Cryptocurrencies will play new role with criminal switching often for hiding advantages. The whole concept of cryptocurrency being anonymous has always been a fundamental reason disagreement for organization, for government, central banks, because it creates that backdoor ability for bad guys to transact without accountability. And one of the reasons why cybercrime is pervasive is because this is a way that they can trade, right? And we know that very well. Okay, so let's look at some of the. So when you look at all that, buy it, and you had a URL, go take a look yourself. I mean, there's different vendors. I didn't mention vendor names because I wouldn't sell for any one of them, and I'm not trying to sell myself, right? And you look at items, some of it are noteworthy, some of them are a good reminder of things that we need to kind of put in place and check boxes that I think I can handle this. Let me validate if I can deal with it. So those are things that you can think through. How about samples for 2022? So for samples of 2022, I will only kind of like put two or three slides, a few points only. One of them is for, of course, this is an analyst view. I won't mention names. You can look at the footnote, the URL. And they did mention by the end of 2023, privacy laws will cover personal information of 75% of the world's population. This is the part that is interesting. When you look at prediction as such, there will be some from analysts, there are some from vendors. And analysts wanted to show the extent of their research and their thought process, their thought leadership. And vendor want to tell you that please buy my product, right? In a nutshell. But when you look at something like this, I would say, oh, okay, good to know that. Doesn't help me, right? Because if there is a privacy law that is made available in where your business operates, you need to take note of that, because that is the one that can hurt you if you're not aware. But if it's somewhere in, let's say this is in Zimbabwe and I'm not there, right? My company is not there. I'm not worried about it. Or my customer is not there. 2025, 60% of organizations will use cybersecurity risk as a primary determinant in conducting third-party transaction and business engagement. This is interesting. What is the prelude to this, right? Supply chain attack is one of the largest concerns for most organizations, right? I was in a call with a CIO, I think it was CIO. I think it's a CIO or CISO of a pretty large bank in India. And this is someone who is senior, who doesn't know the technology. So he doesn't ask me, hey, should I use Zero Trust or XDR or SASE? She asks, how do I stop supply chain attack? How do I stop supply chain attack? And I was a little bit like, what should I tell her? Because the rep was paying me. They say, don't tell her that you can't. Don't tell her that we don't have a silver bullet. And I told her, I say, ma'am, there's no silver bullet. Because it is about technology as much as it is about process and your people's skill set. Right? It is a systemic approach to solving a complex problem. And of course, she was like, well, what do you mean? I thought if I buy a product, it would solve it, no? Or I outsource it to a specific service provider, deal done. I said, no. So I of course, I did all the necessary analysis, break it down and help understand why you can't deal with that, pay for it and then the problem go away. In the recent time, I would say many times when new threat surfaces, one of the thing that you observe is the standard bodies start defining new standard for organization to adopt, which means they can use it to enforce it within the organization or on the third party. So we are familiar with ISO 27001. In ISO 28000, I believe, is the portion on supply chain attack. And you'll find that analyst or vendor that does analysis of the attacker's TTPs, like MITRE, for example, they'll put in place more category and details around the new attack methods and methodology, so that organization can map capability to these methods, right? The third one, percentage of nation state passing legislation to regulate ransomware payment fines. Where does this come from? This came from, if you look at it, there's a story behind it. This came from the fact that when Colonial Pipeline was breached, the leader, the senior executive CEO, make a decision to pay the ransom and start negotiating it in the afternoon, right? When FireEye was publicly FireEye/Mandiant was announced by the company that we were doing the investigation for them, and by a later time we know that they were able, technically they can restore the whole system or data from a backup that they have, but because they were running short of time, they decided to make that payment, right? And you find after which all the news about how the government or FBI went after the attacker, and then took down the infrastructure, shut them down, and recovered close to $2.5 million worth of bitcoins from the threat actors. After which, it says enough is enough, and the United States of America decided to pass some kind of legislation to regulate victims paying the fines and negotiating all this payment. Now, if you think about this, the implication, I would say that what happens if your country and your industry has a regulation that you are not to pay ransomware, negotiate with bad threat actors and pay them the ransom? What would happen to your choices? And recently I had a customer, right? It wasn't using my full stack of my solution, and they were attacked and they were short of resources. And the question that the customer is saying, what can I do? And when we look at his situation, we wanted to tell him that it's pretty grim because you are not in a position to negotiate, and because he is totally locked down. And I say, and you don't have a good way to recover your information. So in scenario like this, it's no longer about prediction. It is about learning from past incident. Are we learning from that? So when you look at prediction in this context, is many of this prediction or opinion comes from learnings that past incident happens. So keeping abreast, not just of the prediction, but of those incident, the latest news, is actually pretty key for you to make good decision for tomorrow. I'm not going to talk through every single point. This is the last point for this analyst. It says by 2025, 70% of CEO will mandate a culture organization resilient to survive coincident threats from cybercrime, severe weather events, civil unrest, and political instability. Do you realize that the first item is cybercrime, and it wasn't sorted in alphabetical order? So this is interesting. And of course, 70%, I'm not sure 70% of United States CEOs or the global CEOs, but it is true that cybercrime is taking the top of the list. It's coming, to the top, floating to the top for organization to understand how to be resilient. Okay. And, at the end of this whole session, I'll talk a little bit about some of the thoughts that I have. I'm not writing this to give you a perfect formula. So I hope some of the sharings can give you some inputs and ideas. This is the next one, and this is specifically ransomware, because there's a lot of saying, hey, I think next year there's a lot of prediction around ransomware. So I pick up a section, and I suspect it is. This one comes a little bit from FireEye/McAfee/Mandiant as well. Mandiant does a lot of the frontline investigation. So I wanted to pick up some of the points and see, are these things that we can learn something, right? So when I read through this, I felt that it was pretty grim. First of all, one of the remarks, no end in sight, increased frequency and expanding tactics. One's like, I know, and give me some good news, right? The second one was interesting. No honor among thieves. more disputes between threat actors. This is an interesting thought that I never thought of, and I thought you may find it be interesting. Why? As ransomware, we call it multifacial, I call it post-compromise. It's like it become complex. What happens is that this is a combination of the people who are good at getting access and the people who will run through the whole 9 yards to negotiate a payment. It's not like the past where you do in a shotgun, you shoot it out and you hope the bullet will hit someone. It's very targeted. And how it's targeted is first, if I had to do everything myself, it take a while. If I buy the access from John, and John can give me a good access to these 3 banks, guess what? My job become easy. I can specialize. So among the whole cybercrime world, you find that specialization is becoming a trend. But because of specialization, part of the challenge you have is you get $1 million ransom, right? You get paid. I didn't know how much you'll be paid, but eventually I knew that you got $1 million. You pay $5,000 for the access to this organization. That's not fair. So what happens? Disagreement, dispute. And remember, these threat actors are not, they're criminals, right? So when they're criminals, they don't look at it as fair and square. There'll be a lot of, now, when this thing happens, guess who will suffer? I almost guarantee you the victim will suffer. Right? The victim will suffer for many different reasons and ways. And today, I don't know how it will manifest in terms of the change in the way it damages, but I'm quite sure it will come about in due time when we see the next 5, 10, 15, 20 ransomware cases of how such disputes result in a victim or an enterprise being caught in the crossfire. Of course, the point, organization will get caught between, it says US government and ransomware actors. And this is because of the legislation, as mentioned by another analyst in front, right? New legislation saying that you can't negotiate with bad guys, you can't pay your ransom. So now organizations are caught because I run a business where I have agreement, I have responsibility and liability when I don't deliver. Because the government says I can't pay ransom, so what do? By paying ransom, you are violating the law, right? So now you are in a very bad catch-22 situation. Cyber physical system increase under threats from norms. Okay, that one I've seen a few, but I think it's okay. We can go to that. How do I put it? I think cyber physical system is what we call OT system. We see an increasing information leaking, teaching amateur how to hack OT system. In a recent time was Thales, I think it was the Thales train system, the train system was the manual was released, right? Or the design was released. So you can imagine at some point in the future, instead of going in, taking your data, threatening to put a company's data on the internet and calling your employee to harass you or the CEO, is for company who are part of a critical infrastructure category. The threat actors will potentially threaten to create calamities like a train wreck or like things like this that forces the victim to pay a huge amount of ransom. So just think about it. More public breaches in the Asia Pac and Japan. This is true even of now compared to before, just because mandatory disclosure laws are becoming more, right? You see that in 2018 in Australia, in February, I think it was 28, they come about the mandatory disclosure law. And within a month, when they published a public report on how many more breaches, it was a 100-page thick. I saw the report, the PDF file, and I'm like, wow, just 2 months, 3 months ago, this is not even available for the public. Okay, and then talk about the criminal groups, cybercrime groups, shift of power within RAAS. We call it ransomware as a service ecosystem, right? So when you look at all this, you guys says, hey, ransomware we most talk about, agree. These are the details. So some of this prediction go into the micro level details about things that changes, the shift of power, how things are, leveraged. It is it is not going to give you a lot of answers, on how to solve the problem, but it gives you an idea of the nature of the problem can change and what you need to do to potentially adjust how you defend against it. The fundamental how to do it doesn't go away, right? It's a systemic approach to the whole problem. Okay. So you look at different of prediction that I talk about, analysts, vendors, the motive is thought leadership, sharing, talk about the details of what they're finding. And this is a proof, right? They know it better, they know the threat actors. How does it translate to what you do is what I would like to see happen. So the last bit here is learnings and takeaways. Learnings, I want to quote from some things I observe. Some is what I hear from. Well, I extracted of some other sessions that I was reading, and it was quite funny, And I thought I will share with you guys. So learnings, right? First of all, when you look at these predictions, identify, is it more strategic in nature? Is it operational? Is it tactical? When I say strategic, is it a directional change? Then you need to start thinking through, if you are doing the same thing, what are the areas that you haven't thought of? What have you not, adjusted your current plan, strategy, your controls to take care of that? For example, we heard about this SOC team. They're all underpowered, under resourced and all this. But just because it's under resourced, if something goes wrong, is that a good reason? So now, if employees are working from home, do you have a playbook that deals with a breach when an employee deals with a situation when an employee uses their home computer to perform remote desktop work for the office, right, without using VPN? Do you have a playbook on that? What are the considerations? I know it's like, oh, but I haven't thought of that. I have no people. Well, if it happens, it happens, right? So what will you do with that? Is the prediction more operational in nature? In this case, when I look at all the different prediction, one thing I will tell you, you need someone to look at Intel, right? The understanding of what is happening and changing is almost as critical to what you're implemented for the organization. And when I say Intel, I'm not talking about IOCs. I'm not talking about give me the MD5 signature for the latest payload for this malware. No. I'm talking about from a geopolitical situation, from a operational intel, what is happening in, let's say, financial services? What are the new threat actors, or what are the trends in the threat actors? What has happened in the past? How does it affect what you do today? Tacticals are details, right? Are they using new TTPs, new payloads? Are my vendor able to respond to my ask when new things happen? When it says, hey, you have machine learning and this unknown malware, we can detect it all, is how do you validate that? There's a lot of consideration when it comes to tactical. Think through that. Even from operational, how do you automate mundane tasks? Take the prediction and see if there are specific area of processes you need to kind of adjust and automate that will help you. The second part on this is it more informational? Is it implementable? Some predictions are information, like X% of legislation will stop you from paying ransom in some countries. Well, okay, so what? Right? Which country? What's the consequence if I pay? Am I going to go to jail? So it's information rather than implementable. And if you look at implementable, like I've seen some that talks about tactics change. We talk about let me see. For example, we talk about 0-day, let's say, vulnerability in system. Then the implementable part is look at your today's vulnerability management strategy and approach. Is it able to handle what happened? Some of the major incident. If something like this happen, can my current solution deal with it, right? Of course, in the prediction, there's so many items. You may not do everything, but what is important is what is the impact of not doing and what is the impact of doing it. And some of this, even out of 100, even you pick one, and if you do it and there's an impact, I would say do it. do it, because that is an impact. And if no one's assessing if doing it has an impact, that's the first thing you got to do. Have someone who assess it, right? Predictions and all this is all one thing. Um, I know that we're all looking for the big title says prediction 2022, 21, but sometimes, many times it comes in different forms. In some cases, it comes in the form of a, what do we call that? Like a report, like analyst report and all this. I'll give you an example. In 2019, when we released the M-Trend report from FireEye slash Mandiant, right? We did talk about a technique that's been evolving called a golden ticket techniques that is used by threat actors, and we've seen that not pervasive enough. And because of that, the FireEye security infosec team internally implement a counter detection approach mechanism, right? By doing some secret sauce, right? Detecting a potential golden ticket attack. And this is around the 80 servers and all that stuff. During the SolarWinds incident, that was one technique that we put in place and operationalized that allow us to see the attacker when the whole world couldn't see them. And you think about it, if I did not review and talk about that incident early, many more organizations would have been impacted by that breach without understanding the whole source and consequences. And of course, many other people will say, "Hey, we're analyzing this incident, what happened." But I can tell you that was shared, in a little bit more private conversation, which is why I didn't talk about the details. But I'm saying that when you look at those analyst report by, in this case, Mandiant, FireEye, and then you look at some of the techniques and all this, that you see new techniques by attackers and all this, those tactical stuff that if you can put in place in your detection, there's an impact that is more long lasting because it is on the ground detection, right? Operational, different level, right? Contextual fit into the organizational plan and your security maturity. Why do I say that? If now I'm trying to replace SEP, which is Symantec endpoint protection, with a EDR solution, trying to talk about building a L3 threat hunting SOC team may not be realistic, right? Let's say I know that I need to form a proactive threat hunting team, but my organization, I'm still using a traditional EPP, antivirus on the endpoint. I haven't got DLP in place. I haven't got a proper network segmentation between my different segment of the network. I haven't have a good solution for working from home. So what I'm saying is when you look at all this, don't get stressed, but use it as input into the overall plan. And I think that is key because it may shuffle your prioritization. But don't, I had a friend, this is a small story, right? He was in the military, and one day he has a commitment on Saturday, where he was supposed to, teach a bunch of kids to do something. So he went but unfortunately he was scheduled to be on duty, right, on Saturday. And for those who have been to military, you probably understand that. So he was like, "Oh no, I need to do this training for the kids, and I would like to, but I'm on duty, so I need to go talk to my sergeant major." So 2 weeks before that, he went to the company sergeant major and said, "Sir, can I ask for a change in my schedule for my duty because I need to, I need to do this training for the kids." And usually, in this case, the sergeant major was saying, "Don't mess with my schedule. I have a plan. Don't mess with my schedule." And at the end, of course, he did manage to change it, but that was like last minute. Why I mentioned that is that compelling event require us to have agility in our plan, right? In cybersecurity, strategy and plan, what is important is not like IT plan because things do change. So take those into consideration and contextualize it into adjusting your strategy and your planning. Okay. So this is the learning part that I see when I read all these things. I like to use a little bit of a few points from this speaker, right? I watch it on YouTube. It's lovely. Nick Espinosa. He's a Forbes Council member, and I talk about the 5 laws of cybersecurity. I'm not sure if any one of you has watched this or read his article. The important part is this is kind of like the cornerstone of understanding cybersecurity. So he mentioned this, like, if there is a vulnerability, it will be exploited. And this is important is human nature. When the first bank vault was built, there was at least one person was trying to figure out how to break into it and steal the money. So same here for the internet. Is it started with virus out of or worms because of being cheeky. They try to prove themselves. Eventually, it becomes cybercrime. It becomes a nation state campaign to push a specific agenda across a country, across a region. And if you look at what Rome did, in the early days, right, thousands of years ago, in today's world, that whole campaign is not done physically, but is done economically. Everything is vulnerable in some ways. I think you all agree. We all agree. Everything is vulnerable in some way. So do not assume that what you have and what you purchase is going to be, safe and all that, especially for your enterprise organization. The third one, first of all, let's try this experiment. This one, we actually did it. So I would like you to do that. If you have access to your email, take a quick glance, there should be one email coming from the organizer that talks about a $100 voucher for Amazon. And interestingly, only the top 10 responder, and no, this is not phishing email, don't get me wrong. You won't get phish, right? And it's not spam. The top 10 who click on it will actually get to fill out the particulars and get a $100 voucher. And there's only 10. So if you take next 10, 15 seconds, please search it in your inbox. If not, search it in your spam folders and all this. And I'll give you 10, 20 seconds to do this. Okay? I don't want you to miss it. Okay. Okay. Yes, and it's interesting because when you and this whole voucher thing is to demonstrate certain point. Okay, I'll do a pause here. Okay, if you can't find the email for any reasons, right? Don't worry because it doesn't exist. It's the same fundamental. So stop doing it if you are doing it. I was trying to establish a fact that we trust even when we should not. And I know that when we go onto the internet, and we deal with work, we deal with emails, there's a lot of trust behind that. I'll give you an example of paranoid. My browser doesn't run with JavaScript turned on. And someone said, well, why? I said, well, because I don't trust it. I don't trust any script that runs on my browser unless I know the website I goes to, right? I say, I do not click on any link that was text to me. I will go to the main site of the company, and if to understand if such a thing actually exists. So someone calls me up and I say, hey, Mr. Ng, I would like to talk to you about your property, blah 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 blah. And I'm like, do I know you? Right? I don't know you. Why would I even have any business relationship with you? So my encouragement is, in the world of cybersecurity, it's not easy to don't take assumptions, right? Fourth, with innovation comes opportunity for exploitation. New ideas, new solution will have exploitation that we haven't thought of. Of course, the number 4 is worsened by the law number 3, where human trust even when they shouldn't. Okay, and if there's any doubt about this viewpoint, look at law number 1. That's when there's a vulnerability, you'll be exploited. My encouragement is that take a look at the YouTube, take a look at the link. Why this 5 law is important is there are many predictions and many opinion and many of this. The cornerstone of why all this thing happens is, to me, this 5 laws applies. And if you do take this 5 law to heart, it will help you look at many of these predictions and all these challenges in a different light. Okay. Last 1 or 2 points, and I'll end up. First is there's different approach in dealing with cybersecurity. Right? I heard about the replacement, just now of endpoints and all this. One is trying to keep intruders out of the network from protection perspective, and the other one is trying to contain them, throw them out when they come in. In today's world, you no longer can expect protection to give you the answer. You have to accept and realize that the whole ability to recover from the actual breach and deal with it, contain it, and ejecting them out, the attacker, is a cornerstone of any cybersecurity posture and solution or strategy. With that, a few takeaways. I won't go through all of them. All the predictions that if you ever get a chance to see, they are good inputs, but they are not the gospel truth, right? So take it with a pinch of salt, have some assessment of what will be relevant to you. Use those predictions to educate your users. Sometimes you want a third party to be used to tell your executive that, hey, I need more money because my guys can't deal with the increasing alert volume. Right? And use that to help you drive your message to people who hold a string purse, right? Establish a posture of cyber resilience. Actually, I was struggling. Should I put this at the last bit, takeaway? Because in the whole presentation, one thing I just want to highlight is that when you look at the posture of cyber resilience, which I think the previous speaker talked a little bit about, is the ability to recover when something goes wrong. You take a hit and you stand up again. And that requires complexity in the process, people, tools. It's not about what you buy, but how do you recover to the point of being operational. Okay, having a roadmap, we all know that. Plot your path, not a path that the guy next door tells you, right? Plot a path that you need to know that you can move forward and establish the gap.